Watch this.
It was the controversial bill that added fentanyl to the mandatory minimum list and created a crime for drug-induced homicide. Well, it's now a law, despite several lawmakers not being too thrilled to give it the go-ahead. It takes two, sometimes. A second bill to keep public money from paying for gender transitions has now left the gate after the first one to make a run tripped over its own language. Boise lost a member of its homeless community earlier this month. Many didn't know his name, despite regularly seeing his face out on the street corners. But that didn't stop hundreds from showing up to honor him, including some no one knew would come. Governor Little has signed 7 bills into law so far this session, beginning with the annual bill to update the Internal Revenue Code, to what he signed yesterday, and that would be House Bill 406. Mandatory minimum sentences for fentanyl trafficking is now on the books, or it will be come July 1st. The idea behind the bill was to be a deterrent to those dealing in that deadly drug that seems to be everywhere these days by making a minimum sentence of 3 years and a fine of $10,000 for anyone having possession of 4 grams of fentanyl. House Bill 406 also created a new law called drug-induced homicide, which means if you give someone a drug, say like at a party, and they die, well, you could be fined $25,000 and sent to prison for life. However, House Bill 406 does not include a requirement to show intent to distribute fentanyl. All you have to do is just have it, those 4 grams. And that's just one of the concerns that followed this bill throughout the State House. The others that were brought up over days and weeks of debate, the fiscal impact, which wasn't specific in the bill, but it surely is going to increase the budget for state attorneys, court costs, and incarceration. There was the issue taking sentencing discretion away from judges. And as for how much it would require to qualify those 4 grams, which is basically the weight of 4 paper clips or $4 bills, well, that would apply to anything the fentanyl happens to be cut with. So if it's mixed with another opioid, well, it's the entire weight of that product. That's also included. All of these problems with the bill were addressed during debates, including the pressure being applied to lawmakers to pass it.
I wish we could send this bill to the amending order and do the difference between a user and a real trafficker, put the intent language in that the federal law has, fix the fiscal note, fix the emergency.
It might be from, several years of being a defense attorney, but I am not persuaded that good policy comes from passing bad laws and then relying on discretion. It's very important that we pass good laws that don't have flaws in them, rather than passing a law to which we need to say time and time again, that will never happen.
This is an election year, and so it's been very difficult to really vote how you want to vote on this bill. We all want to stop fentanyl, which is a huge problem. But many of us know if we don't vote correctly with law enforcement on this bill, we will be law enforcement haters or fentanyl lovers or drug trafficker lovers, which is really a lot of pressure. Very unfortunate that that gets put upon to us to pass a bill that way.
All 3 of those representatives, all 3 of those lawmakers, all voted yes on House Bill 406. Representative Scott, though, she did try to get the bill sent back to the amending order to make changes, to make it a better bill, but that was turned away by a vote of 19 to 49. She was also hoping the Senate would make the necessary changes to the bill, but they didn't, and it passed right along party lines across the Senate, and House Bill 406 went onto the governor's desk as written, and he did sign it into law yesterday.
I ask unanimous consent that House Bill 520 be returned to the Judiciary Rules and Administrative Committee. There's a replacement bill for that.
Yep, the original no public funds for gender transition bill, well, that's been pulled, but a backup has just been called off the bench. House Bill 520 has been replaced by House Bill 668, which was introduced today.
This piece of legislation ensures that taxpayer dollars are not used to provide medical treatments and surgeries for the purpose of changing the appearance of a person's sex in a way that is not consistent with their biological sex.
Okay, so the purpose of the replacement is to clarify some language left out of the starter bill. They wanted to make it more clear to people, to make sure everyone knows this would apply to both adults and to minors. and making clear the exceptions as well. The, quote, exempted surgical operations or medical interventions, end quote, would only apply when it was necessary to the health of the person. There's also an exception that is for anyone who gets hurt, gets a disease or a disorder, or just gets hurt during any other gender transition procedures to remedy like ambiguous sexual characteristics, chromosome abnormalities. Those are also allowed. House Bill 668 will now get its own hearing in the coming days in the House Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee. Another quick legislative update. Senate Bill 1273 proposing a state-issued voter guide. That passed the Senate today, 2213, and will be heading over to the House. You know, we have a lot of new people who have moved to the state of Idaho the last few years. Perhaps some of those people moved here alone, without telling anyone in their family where they went. Or maybe you're just one of those people who just isn't great about keeping in touch with your family. So what happens when that person gets in a serious accident? How would their family know that what happened to them and where to find them? Well, there's a bill in the State House that would create a statewide next of kin database. It would be a voluntary database to which you would add your information when you get your driver's license or renew it. If passed, this bill, should you pass, law enforcement and county coroners would then be able to use that information to contact your next of kin, to get in contact with your family. Bannock County coroner testified in House State Affairs Committee hearing that Idaho does not have a system like this to track people's next of kin in case of emergency. So the bill was sent to the 14th order for an amendment last week because, well, the bill's sponsor, that'd be Senator Mark Harris from Soda Springs, he wants to make it clear in the bill, this information would only be used by law enforcement and coroners and not to be used for other things like, attorneys looking to settle an estate. So what happens when a next of kin is not able to be found, when someone dies? That's what happened a couple weeks ago with the passing of one of Boise's homeless community. If you live in Boise or pass through town once in a while, there's a high chance you've seen him. Bearded, blue eyes, out panhandling. Maybe that kind of blends in now. After all, our local shelters and caseworkers say the number of people experiencing homelessness these days, that's certainly increasing. But Paul Gilbert wasn't just a number. He was a man, loved for stories and his imperfections. And when they couldn't find his family, the community of Interfaith Sanctuary wanted to show their respect for Paul in their own way. So they put on a public memorial, and it pulled in some surprising attendees. Here's Andrew Bartline.
It's amazing how many people are here.
Where most Boise winter evenings have us counting the degrees, this huddle of heat has their tally marks for stories.
If you guys can't see, my knees knocking.
Some varying in validity.
I know for a fact he was not a pilot.
Others grounded like gospel.
And we collected all the quarters and the pennies we could find.
It's the complicated life of Paul Gilbert.
I love that man. He was my brother.
Not by blood.
I did
not to these men.
Want this veteran to go alone.
Because he nearly did.
It's easy to look at someone rough around the edges and let our assumptions grant us permission into giving them a wide berth. Best to stay away from folks like that, right? And he comes off as gruff and standoffish, but I saw right through it.
Jerry Lynn might call herself a moth.
I did.
To Paul, the flame.
He didn't beat around the bush. No flowery words. Straight to the point.
The same is said in his memory.
We started to drink, and...
A story Jerry Lynn set out to punctuate herself.
He drinks too much and he knows he does. He doesn't want your sympathy, fake niceties, or pretend concern. He just wants to get through another day. Again, I can't speak for him, but it feels like he has given up.
Big words for a woman who didn't see the half of it.
I had nowhere to go. I had no savings.
From Hyde Park to the homeless shelter, Jerry Lynn was now side by side with those same blue eyes.
They looked out for me. They made me feel more welcome. I was like a deer in headlights. I was terrified.
It's fair to call their relationship
He's like this
complicated.
Proud military Vietnam vet. He loved to talk about his military experience. And if I had been older, I would have been protesting the Vietnam War.
No picket signs in sight, but most of Paul's life decisions were far from endorsed.
It doesn't change the fact I loved him.
That's Jodine, his sister.
It doesn't change the fact I loved him.
Paul was homeless for 15 years.
Just to be honest, I thought he was going to go alone.
That's his son, Wes.
And to know that he was cared for and loved, and he's missed. And he went peacefully. It means the world to me.
I don't think he thought he was seen anymore. Real heroes live among us, but we don't see them anymore. We don't recognize them. We don't seek them out. But he's there, sitting in his walker on a street corner near the liquor store, disheveled, abrasive, gruff, sparkling blue eyes, holding a sign asking for spare change. A real-life hero, my friend Paul.
Jerry Lynn's journal went viral, drawing a flock of complete strangers to a memorial service to celebrate a man they knew but never saw.
You call him a hero.
Absolutely.
Why?
You know, not only for his military service, right before the end of his life, he was still trying to protect this, soccer mom in a world where she didn't feel she belonged and she was out of place and she was scared. He was still protecting people right up to the very end.
Paul's son and sister both had some tongue-in-cheek words at the service to remember him. Stubborn was a common word. Pain in the rear was probably a strong second. But the most frequent we heard was love. He was known by the people at the shelter, Brian. Mm-hmm. He's missed by the people at the shelters, I should say, Corpus Christi Day Shelter, Interfaith Sanctuary. He was well known, and you could see that a lot of people care deeply about him.
Yeah, and what I like about this story, we've talked about this, is the fact that there are several layers to this. There's several layers to people, obviously. Yep. And what you portray or how you are around a certain group of people could be completely different than how you're perceived, how you're seen by another group of people.
Yeah, I had a professor in college say that humans are infinitely complex, like each individual one. Nobody's perfect, but he seemed like a pretty cool guy.
Yeah, I mean, Paul certainly had his demons.
I recognized his picture. I was like, I know that guy.
Yeah, a lot of people did. He certainly had his demons, but it shows that he just was there for people when it mattered, and that's kind of important.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. And another one bites the dust. That's another runner in the Republican presidential race dropping out. And you probably didn't even realize he was still in it. That leaves Idaho with just two obvious options left in the caucus. Well, maybe you think your voice won't matter. Well, it matters to us. You can tell us everything you want to tell us about the 208 just by texting this number, 208-321-5614. Don't forget to include your name and the hashtag the 208. If you keep it clean, you keep it concise, and you keep it clever, well, it makes it easy so we can share yours at the end of the show.
I'm running for the presidency of the United States of America.
Well, not anymore. Texas businessman, pastor, church creator, and presidential longshot Ryan Binkley is now no longer one of those things. This morning, Binkley bounced himself from the race for Republican candidate for president after, well, loaning himself more than $10 million of his own money and then earning just a bit more than 2,000 votes across 4 nominating states. He even finished behind candidates who were no longer in the running this past weekend in South Carolina. So then there were 2. That is the number of viable Republican candidates left for the Idaho GOP presidential caucus, which is happening this weekend. just former South Carolina Governor, that is, Nikki Haley, and former President Donald Trump, who, by the way, Binkley endorsed on his way out the door. Of course, all the candidates will be on the ballot for this Saturday in Idaho's Republican caucus. You can vote for any of the others if you'd like, other than Nikki Haley and Donald Trump. That caucus is going to start at high noon at 210 sites across the Gem State. The attorneys for Idaho's longest-serving death row inmate are throwing one last Hail Mary before, well, Thomas Creech is set to be executed. They're asking the U.S. Supreme Court to review his case. So what will their answer be? Abby Davis has that and more in today's 411.
The state of Idaho is set to execute Thomas Creech tomorrow. He's Idaho's longest-serving death row inmate. Last night, Creech's attorneys filed a motion asking the U.S. Supreme Court to review the case, saying the prosecution presented evidence that was false and, quote, bogus. Creech's attorneys also asked the Supreme Court to stay his execution while that petition is pending. A defense attorney previously told KTVB the Supreme Court very rarely stays executions, so as of now, Creech will still be executed tomorrow morning.
We want to have a large input from our community about how to do this.
The Nampa School District is about to change who can go where. It's in the process of redrawing school boundaries because of 4 schools closing at the end of the school year. You have one more chance to be a part of deciding those boundaries. There's a meeting tonight at 5:30 at Columbia High School. It's crunch time for Girl Scouts because cookie sales are in full swing. All cookie proceeds stay with the local councils and troops to help pay for their scout experiences throughout the year. So if you see your local troop at a booth or an order form in your break room, don't walk, run, because favorites like Thin Mints, peanut butter patties, and more are only available for a limited time. For more information on how to order, visit our website, ktvb.com. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Abby Davis.
You talk about false spring. Yeah, we had some beautiful weather over the weekend. Look at the changes now. It's cold outside. Temperature is 41 degrees. You see the clouds out in the distance. It looked like it was trying all day long, but really couldn't do much of anything. It's pretty weak on the backside of the storm system that we just had. They didn't receive much in the way of snow up in McCall, Stanley, or Sun Valley. But as you notice the temperatures, they're cold, 25 degrees in McCall and Stanley with 20 degrees for the current temperature there. Here's a better look as you take a look at the shot and notice probably more than anything else, the traffic in Boise. They had a little sunshine in and out with some of the clouds over here around Twin Falls this afternoon as well. So temperature-wise, Twin is at 30 degrees for the current, 41 degrees for Boise, 41 degrees for Nampa. Now let me change this over to the wind chill. Wind chill in Twin, 19 degrees. Same thing for Jerome. It's down to 8 degrees for Stanley. Temporarily, we've lost Haley, but it's there. As you can see, 33 degrees for Boise. That's the wind chill. And Nampa, the winds are not blowing quite as much, but it's 41 degrees for their wind chill. As you see, they did have a gust today up to 20 miles an hour, 22 in Boise, Caldwell with 18. Down here toward Twin Falls, where the winds are really blowing. As you can see, they're almost up to 50 miles an hour. So that's the difference. Now, across the nation, you can see the cold air here over most of the Northwest. This is where the colder temperatures are. It actually warmed up when you take a look at Cleveland, 73 degrees for today. It's going to start warming along the East Coast a little more too, but through most of the South, temperatures are in the mid-70s, even into the 80s, getting pretty close to 90 degrees. And if you look at the Northwest, this is the chilly part of the country right now. Seattle only 41, and that's cold for Seattle. 42 for Boise. Portland had 46. Salt Lake City with the high temperature of 35 degrees. So what's going on? Well, I'm going to put this into motion. I want you to see this. This storm system that is out here horizontal is almost going to become more vertical, okay? This cold air is going to force this area down like a pendulum swings into the area. And as it does, it's going to be bringing up warm air from the southwest. So let's put this into motion. And you see this storm system. You see the cold air that's pushing it through. Here it is on the southern tip of this sort of thing. And as it comes in, this is looking at Wednesday, a little warmer air coming up from the southwest. And that's why you see in the 7-day forecast that we're likely going to be seeing some temperatures getting near 60 degrees by about Thursday. But it's not going to last long because the cold air that's pushing it in is going to come in behind it. So just kind of keep it in mind. So for the mountains, this means that we're going to be seeing quite a bit of snow, but very heavy when you get into Friday and Saturday. So once you get into Friday, you can see all of these numbers up here. That's pretty good amounts of snow, not only just in the city, but especially in some of the higher elevations. Not much here in the valley. Temperature-wise, it goes up because of that storm system, and then you can see it goes down. These are all the lows, even going into next week, which means that we're going to have some pretty chilly morning lows. And when you look at the highs, same thing. Temperatures will drop back into the 40s or so, and then possibly get up to about 51 degrees. That's a week from Friday, okay? So we've got some cooler conditions. If you look at the 7-day forecast, breezy conditions for tomorrow and Thursday, temperatures coming up. And then here's the storm system with rain in the valley. You might see a little snow coming in on Saturday morning. As you look at Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, starts to dry up a bit, but still we've got most of those high temperatures into the middle 40s. So prepare for all the changes coming our way.
We got a lot of comments today about the mandatory minimum sentencing bill that was signed into law by Governor Brad Little just yesterday, including this one, Jose in Caldwell. 406, perfect example of lawmakers who don't have the guts to stand up for what they believe in. They knew it was a bad bill and they still voted for it. They wouldn't even vote to send it back for amendment, which would hopefully correct it. How did we get to the point where our elected officials can't be trusted to have the courage to do what's right? I guess we get what we pay for when we don't spend the time to really vet those that we do vote for. That's from Jose in Caldwell. The GOP is more concerned with passing a bill than passing a well-thought-out one. This explains why we keep paying millions in unconstitutional bills that keep getting challenged in court. They're too busy suing doctors and librarians and dealing with cannibalism, which, by the way, still in committee, has yet to have a hearing. We'll see what happens with that one. I hope the constituents of those legislators that voted for a bill they publicly admitted to being a bad bill for the purpose of re-election, well, Jack hopes you will vote them out. We all deserve better, he says. Other states are getting rid of mandatory minimums as opposed to adding more. Judges need to be able to decide cases individually, but this bill will just increase the jail and prison populations, let alone Idaho's high recidivism rate. Why not try something new that just might work? Asked Karen in Boise. It's true. Since 1972, we were incarcerating about 100 per 100,000 people in the U.S. That jumped into the 700s as we get later, just decades later. So it is not a system that works for a lot of people. Andrew, great story about Paul. Wish I'd known him, says Jackie. Sometimes it just takes the time to get to know somebody, to find out their story, because as Ginny said, there are people around that still know the person you used to be. Even if it wasn't a great person and you became one, or vice versa. It's good to know everybody's story, all of it. We'll see you tomorrow.